Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Joining us now for War Brief and the review of some of the headlines of today's newspapers from around the world is Adefemi Akinsanya. Good morning, Adefemi.
Good morning, Dr. Rubin. Good morning, Vimbai. And welcome back, Rufai. How are you doing?
Good morning, Femi.
That's me.
Femi.
That's
Take
me.
your tennis seriously.
I'm taking it seriously. Rufai is my de facto tennis coach. So, I've missed a few practices, but don't worry, I'm back soon. Good morning to you, viewers. Let me tell you what's happening around the world. Now, US President Donald Trump has warned there could be more American strikes here in Nigeria if Christians are still being killed. Now, Trump made these comments in an interview with the New York Times when he was asked about his administration's Christmas Day military strike in Sokoto. Now, the US military said at the time it carried out a strike against Islamic State militants in northwest Nigeria at the request of Nigeria's government. And we know here in Nigeria, the official line was that the strike was a joint operation targeting terrorists and had nothing to do with any particular religion. Now, Trump is quoted as saying, "I would love to make it a one-time strike on Nigeria, but if they continue to kill Christians, it will be a many-time strike." Now, that was Donald Trump's own words to the New York Times. Now, staying with Donald Trump, the US president has announced the withdrawal of the United States from 66 international organizations identified as part of the Trump administration's review of what it calls wasteful, ineffective, and harmful international organizations. Now, let's take a look at the list of those organizations that they've withdrawn from. We've broken it down into two. These are the 35 non-United Nations agencies. As you can see, there's a whole host of them. Now, included in those non-United Nations organizations, there are, of course, 35 which United States have left. So they include the Global Counterterrorism Forum, the Global Forum on Migration and Development, the International Renewable Energy Agency, the Venice Commission of the Council of Europe too. So these are the non-United Nations organizations, 35 of them, which the United States has withdrawn from. Now, there are 31 UN organizations also which the United States has withdrawn from. These are them. So again, these are 31, and they include the UN Economic and Social Council Economic Council, which include commissions for Africa, Latin America, and the Caribbean. There's also the Framework Convention on Climate Change. That's also seen the United States depart from. There's the Office of Special Representatives of the Secretary General for Children in Armed Conflict, also that same office on sexual violence in conflicts and on violence against children. The United Nations Democracy Fund has also, the Americans have also withdrawn from that, and there's also a withdrawal from them on the UN Register of Conventional Arms. Now, the White House says that these organizations are a waste of taxpayer dollars. This brings us essentially to our next story, which is the French President Emmanuel Macron and Germany's President Frank-Walter Steinmeier have condemned US foreign policy during the Trump administration, saying that Washington was breaking free from international rules and the world risked turning into a robber's den. So very strong words. So let's take Macron firstly. He was speaking at the Élysée Palace on Thursday, and he said that multilateral institutions are functioning less and less effectively. But this is what stood out to me in his speech. Now, if we take a look at this graphic, Macron says that France rejects the new colonialism and new imperialism, but also vassalage and the defeatism. What we have achieved for France and in Europe is a step in the right direction. Greater strategic autonomy, less dependence on the United States and China. Some very strong words, not very common from Emmanuel Macron when he's talking about the United States in this context. And then looking at the German president, for his part, he talks about the fact that, okay, so Steinmeier, he is the current German president. Now, in terms of Germany's political structure, the president is more so a ceremonial title, whereas it's the chancellor that really wields the political power. Nevertheless, Steinmeier is Germany's former foreign minister, so he does have some stock in this matter. And he was speaking at a symposium in Berlin earlier this week to mark his 70th birthday. And during that event, this is what he had to say. Let's take a look at that. Now, he says that there has been a breakdown of values by our most important partner, the United States, which helped build this world order. It is about preventing the world from turning into a robber's den where the most unscrupulous take whatever they want. Smaller, weaker states risk becoming completely defenseless, and entire regions could be treated as the property of a few great powers. Now, neither Macron nor Steinmeier mentioned Venezuela specifically, but it's safe to assume that the US capture of the Venezuelan president, Nicolas Maduro, is front of mind when they both made these comments, as is Greenland. Now, in fact, the European Union Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas said on Thursday that the bloc, that's the European Union, was weighing its response if the United States plans to acquire Greenland materializes. We know that Greenland is strategically important for the United States, being that it has a lot of minerals on its land, which clearly the United States is interested in. Meanwhile, Venezuela has released 5 political prisoners, and it's expected to free many more as it continues efforts to appease the United States. Just behind me, we've heard that the released prisoners include Rocio San Manuel, who is a dual Venezuelan Spanish citizen and a respected analyst of the country's armed forces. Now, the president of Venezuela's National Assembly, Jorge Rodriguez, this is the gentleman being sworn in here. He is the brother of the acting president, or the interim president, Delcy Rodriguez. This is her brother, and he was the one who made this announcement that these releases included both Venezuelans and foreign political prisoners. Now, the release is presented as a unilateral gesture by the Bolivarian government and, by the Venezuelan government. I know their official name is the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, essentially, but they are aimed at consolidating peace and peaceful coexistence in the country, and comes amid intense international pressure and internal tensions that have persisted since the controversial 2024 elections, and also mass arrests that have followed thereafter. Now, that brings to an end our world brief, but moving on to our newspaper headlines across Nigeria and indeed the world, let's take a look at the front page of This Day. This Day leads with reports that the Rivers State House of Assembly has begun a 3rd impeachment process against Governor Simi Fubara and his deputy, halting the presentation of the 2026 budget over allegations of gross misconduct. Now, the move has drawn widespread condemnation from political groups and civil society organizations who warn it could destabilize the state and undermine peace accord brokered by the president himself. This Day also reports that the ADC, that's the African Democratic Congress, has set up a 22-member committee to review its own constitution in order to promote inclusiveness, transparency, and accountability. So lots of politics happening there. Let's take a look at the Daily Independent this morning, which reports that the PDP has released INEC's certified true copy report on the Ekiti governorship primaries. They are insisting that it complied with the law and accuse INEC of bias and a deliberate attempt to exclude its duly nominated candidate from the election. So very strong words coming from the PDP. Moving on to the Daily Trust today. The Daily Trust reports that citizens and businesses remain skeptical about these new tax laws. They've been raising concerns over transparency, also enforcement, and the impact on livelihoods. This is despite government assurances of economic stabilization with these new tax laws. Let's take a look at the Daily Trust. The Daily Trust also looks at River State, but what we are going to talk about is this story just here. 10 children dying of cholera in Taraba State. Now, these 10 children are aged between 4 and 10. They have died following a cholera outbreak in Shangi town, which is in the Takum local government area of Taraba State. Very unfortunate there. The Punch this morning does report that the fuel supply deal between the Dangote refinery and 20 major marketers has collapsed over pricing disagreements. This has triggered a surge in petrol imports in November 2025. Now, the breakdown followed Dangote's reluctance to cut prices in line with falling global benchmarks, prompting marketers to turn to imports and forcing the refinery to revert to open market sales. That's what the Punch write-up says. And moving on to our UK papers, let's take a look at The Guardian this morning. Now, The Guardian reports that there have been further allegations of verbal abuse by Reform UK leader Nigel Farage relating to his school days. Now, Farage has previously either denied the allegations of racist or anti-Semitic behaviour or suggested that he never directly racially abused anybody. Interesting. Lastly, let's take a look at the Daily Mail. Now, the Daily Mail reports on what it calls a humiliating U-turn by the UK government over a planned rise in business rates for pubs. There's a lot of back and forth this week. So following criticism of the tax hikes, the newspaper says that the Chancellor is preparing a package of emergency help within days. Also pictured is Renee Nichols Good, who is the woman who was shot at the wheel of her car by immigration officers in the United States earlier this week. So those are your well-briefed stories and your newspaper headlines from across the world. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Okay, fine. I mean, I'm not surprised what's happening in the world today, especially with Trump. Go back historically, the 1940s, exactly what Hitler in Germany was doing. Hitler also got into power with a wave of nationalism. Because you remember that after the stock market crash and all the problems that happened, the 28, 29 stock market crash, Germany took the beating a lot. And they needed a leader that could, sort of bring Germany back. So Hitler was that leader. And he had written Mein Kampf to tell them that it was about German nationalism, the Aryan race and things like that. And then Jewish people were the problem. And he spread the propaganda around the world, and some leaders kept on sulking to him, the likes of, I think was it Chamberlain that said we should give him Sudetenland in Germany. And when he was given Sudetenland, he went ahead to take all over Europe. Exactly what is happening today. For good measure, Femi, Hitler too also removed Germany from international multilateral institutions. And this is the second time Trump is doing it. He did it in the first term when he was here. So him doing it again. And people like Macron, they can keep deceiving themselves, talking up to him. Macron is talking in parentheses. He can't really mention Trump and America because he's talking up to him. But you see, the thing about the bully is when you talk up to him, you're the fool. You know why? The same Trump revealed a private conversation he had with Macron in public to indict Macron as regards the price of pharmaceuticals. So if Trump can do the same to Macron, he could keep talking up to him, and Macron can keep talking to him. But for people like Steinmeier that could actually come out, because Steinmeier has an antecedent of history to know what happened then, I'm happy. So people should keep telling him, and they should brace up for the worst, because leaders like this will grow even wild. And for I want to call it a very funny name, for the Vichy government being run in Venezuela, congratulations to them. Let them keep fooling themselves. It pretty much reminds me, the government in Venezuela now pretty much reminds me of the Vichy government in France that was led by Pétain. You remember the Vichy government after the Germans took over, and they put Pétain there to be able to run the Vichy government, the authoritarian anti-Semitic government, out of Vichy. It was in Vichy, then that's what we called the Vichy government. But guess what? When liberation came to France, those that stood tall, like the man from Colombie d'Église, the famous de Gaulle from Colombie d'Église, was a true hero in France. The likes of Pétain today have not been recognized because they went with the oppressors. So Rodriguez should keep going on with the oppressors America here. At some point, Venezuela will stabilize. So all of this thing that's happening today, history has happened before. It happened about 100 years ago. Let's keep deceiving ourselves. I yield the floor, Vimbai.
Well, I think we're currently at a place in international relations where we're seeing different strategies that are used by different countries in order to attain hegemony. Earlier this morning, I was having a conversation with someone when I said, well, if you look at the Chinese example, as an example, China focuses on what they call non-interference in investment and business. So their expansion across the world, involvement in various places, has been based on the fact that we don't care what you do with your politics, we don't care if you have human rights or not, we just want X, Y, Z, and this is how the deal will look. And you juxtapose that with this current Trump administration and the United States and how we're seeing systematically around the world, there's this unilateral demand for what is best for America, even if it may not be what is best for whatever that country may be. And that has obviously caused a huge fallout, as is expected globally. Now, when I look at the responses from France and Germany and so forth, I mean, I'm not really moved by it because it reminds me of 1884 when they sat down and had the conference with a man called, remember yesterday we spoke about Otto von Bismarck and the scramble for Africa and how that Berlin conference was shaped by the fact that there was so much competition from various colonial powers for various territories that they had to come together, sit down at a table and carve out different areas. This is after King Leopold Leopold II of Belgium had made incursions on the Congolese basin. And this is what we see again. We're now seeing the Europeans saying, and it's only because of Greenland and subsisting issues with Denmark that suddenly they care. Because if this had happened to Venezuela in a silo, I don't think anybody would bat an eyelid. But it's getting a little bit too close to home now. So now they're in essence calling for Donald Trump. This is what I read between the lines, to say, please come to the table so that as we are all neo-imperialists, let's respect each other's boundaries. Don't overstep into an area that's not yours.
Keep over there in the global south, right?
You have your area. Please don't encroach on our area. As for potential of more strikes coming into Nigeria, I just continue to hope that this is all in collaboration with the Nigerian government, not cooperation, meaning I hope that the Nigerian government is not being coerced into this action, because we've seen that the possibility of such a scenario is high, given what we're seeing with the Trump administration in the rest of the world.
Okay, American foreign policy is the big subject that you have put on the table. An American foreign policy process has always oscillated between isolationism and liberal internationalism. That's the theory. However, under President Trump, we have seen the worst example of isolationism and provincialism, as opposed to what he himself referred to as globalism. Now, that's a theoretical construct for what he has done, and he's been consistent in that regard, trying to remove America from the global stage. In other words, a retreat from internationalism. He did it in his first term. He has made it worse this time around. One of the first things he did on day one, when he assumed office last year, was to just say, look, we are pulling out of the UN Convention on Climate Protection, Climate Change. Now he has gone up to say 65, or is this 66? 31 related UN agencies, 35 non-UN related agencies. So that in itself gives the picture of isolationism. He says he's protecting American sovereignty, he's protecting the American taxpayer, he's also, trying to promote America First policy. They're taking together what President Trump has done is to hurt America and also to hurt the international system. And that is what, most people are complaining about. Take climate change. Now, the United States not being part of the green economy is also going to put the United States at a disadvantage, just as it will affect the rest of the world. Now, the same Donald Trump says, okay, one strike in Nigeria, but you would have more strikes if Christians are not protected in Nigeria. This is the same U.S., which he has withdrawn from the Global Counter-Terrorism Fund.
Correct. So
you find all these contradictions in President Trump's retreat from the global space. However, the caveat, two, provided by Steinmeier, who says that what President Trump is trying to do is to create a robber's den in the world where the most obnoxious, person can just take what he wants. Two, France, that's Macron, says that, look, President Trump is violating the same international order that America helped to create. That is another contradiction there, because America was at the very beginning, whether it was the League of Nations, even if they didn't go with League of Nations eventually because of the issues with League of Nations, and then the United Nations. Now the United Nations has also come forward to say that there's a contradiction here. America contributes 22% of the budget, followed by China, 20% annual budget of the United Nations. Then there's also the Peacekeeping Fund, where America, has to contribute 25%. Now, last year, America refused to meet its obligations. And if you don't meet your obligations twice, if you don't meet it 2025, 2026, you will not have a vote in the General Assembly. Other members of the Alliance of the Security Council have met their own obligations. So it's not a very straightforward thing about President Trump going to New York Times and saying, I don't believe in international law. I'm guided by my own morality. Who does that? So what President Trump is actually violating is international cooperation. It's turning America away from the world, and it's damaging the humanitarian framework in the world. So that's the context of it that I see. But meanwhile, Iran is in more trouble. 31 provinces have all been in trouble. The Iranian authorities have cut internet allocation. They've killed about 45 people, and so this is the problem. Greenland, America says, whether you like it or not, we will buy Greenland, or we will invest in Greenland. So all of these contradictions within the international space, which will determine, international relations in the year 2026.
Indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Adefemi. On Greenland, I wonder if the citizens will accept $100,000 per person to sell their country. What a world we're living in. We'll take a short break now.
$2.5 trillion.
In total.
That's the value. They say they don't want to buy. The Danish representative of Greenland in Danish parliament says, no, we are not selling. That is off the table. But there will be a meeting next week between Marco Rubio and the Danish representatives.